Welcome back on Africa 24 English for a new edition of the interview. Today with Mr. Rene Awambeng, President and founder of Premier Invest, we look back at the stakes of trade and investment opportunities between Africa and the Caribbean in the context of the reform of the global financial architecture. Mr. Awambeng, thank you for joining us on Africa 24. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for being back at home. Let's go into the real matter of this interview. The 31st annual meeting of Afreximbank and the 3rd African Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum are being held under the theme, Taking Our Destiny in Hand, Economic Prosperity on the Platform of Global Africa. In your opinion, is this theme timely in a context where African and Caribbean countries are struggling to trade with each other at the regional level?
No, thank you very much. We first of all have to thank the African Export-Import Bank for organizing its 31st annual general meetings in Nassau in the Bahamas, and also the 3rd African Caribbean Trade Investment Promotion Forum. I must say I have attended all the African Caribbean Trade Investment Promotion Forums. I've been part of this journey to link Africa and the Caribbean. And it is important to see that the awareness of promoting trade, development and investment between the CARICOM countries of the Caribbean and Africa is high on the agenda today. Africa presents a unique opportunity from its vibrant young population. It presents a unique opportunity from the single economic zone under the African Continental Free Trade arrangement. The African diaspora, which is seen as the 56th country of the continent, which is basically our brothers and sisters in the diaspora and the Caribbean, we need to see how we build the right linkages with them to promote trade, to promote our historical ties, to promote development and to promote investment. There are a number of factors which make this platform very attractive. The first one is our historical, our cultural ties that we have. The second one is the opportunities that exist in various sectors like hospitality, like tourism, like aquaculture, marine culture, agriculture, processing, and I can name many more services, financial services. So today we have a gathering of Caribbean and African financial institutions, businessmen and women who have come together to see how they can promote trade between themselves. First of all, intra-African trade, intra-Caribbean trade, to see how they can promote investments, to see how they can promote development, to take our destiny as a community together. So what are we doing to do that? We, for example, in Premier Invest, are helping some financial institutions to see how we build the bridge between Africa and the Caribbean. We're helping an African bank to be able to partner with a Caribbean bank to do business in Europe. That linkage between the financial institutions will create a natural bridge for payments, for collections, for diaspora remittances, for trade, for investments between the African continent and the Caribbean region, the CARICOM region. We believe that that financial architecture, that financial infrastructure is fundamental for any business to be done, because people want to know how they get paid and how their money is secured. So we must build that financial infrastructure between the Caribbean and Africa.
You spoke about a You talked about building a bridge between Africa and the Caribbean. So now, in 2022, the International Trade Center published a report identifying over $1 billion in export potential between Africa and the Caribbean, indicating that by channeling investment into growth areas, Africa could increase its merchandise exports to the Caribbean by 54% by 2026. What, to you, are the priority sectors for investment?
Before we even get to the priority sectors, Africans and Caribbeans must first understand what the opportunities for trade are. So I believe the first thing is the trade information and trade education. So what is it that we can produce in the Caribbean, and what is it that we can produce in Africa? How can we use the strategic geographic location of the Caribbean to take advantage of the vast markets of Canada and North America and the vast markets of Latin America? For example, if you take the agricultural sector, where we have soft commodities like cocoa that is largely produced, or coffee that is largely produced in the Equator Belt, in Nigeria, in Cameroon, in Ghana, for example, if we agreed to process our soft commodities here in the Caribbean region and export to those markets, we will be adding value addition to these economies and attracting the large economies of North America, Canada, and Latin America. Today, the majority of that processing goes from Africa into Europe, and from Europe into China and the rest of the world, and very little value comes back to Africa. So one of the key sectors, after we've identified the opportunities, for me is actually, first of all, the agricultural sector. Then we have the sector of hospitality. We have the sector of logistics and transportation, whether it's air transportation or maritime transportation. The same challenges that Africa faces in intra-African communications in terms of transport, the intra-Caribbean face the same problems. You should try to move from one Caribbean island to another island. You probably have to go back to North America, to Miami or New York to fly back. But the experience that we have in Africa and the success that we have with intra-African airlines is something that could be replicated in the Caribbean. So I believe that trade information, financial infrastructure and architecture of linking the banks, transformation of our soft commodities, hospitality are very quick wins on the table, which will help to grow intra-African, intra-Caribbean trade and help us to build and take our destiny in our hands.
All right, so you mentioned something really critical before. Despite the structural challenges and severe shocks facing African countries, the economic outlook this year is really positive. Growth is expected to reach 3.7% in 2024, but for Latin America and the Caribbean, the World Bank forecasts a regional GDP growth at only 1.6% in 2024, the lowest of all the regions in the world. Could this asymmetry create a trade imbalance between these two regions that are trying now to trade and invest in each other?
Certainly, there may be trade imbalances that exist between these regions based on existing trade arrangements, based on the volumes of trade that exist. But notwithstanding, the Caribbean presents a significant opportunity for additional business. Let's look at the blue economy, which is marine agriculture, aquaculture. If we invested in food security around fish farming, around aquaculture, growing and processing fish in the high seas of the Caribbean, which has a very low carbon footprint. Fish has the lowest carbon footprint in terms of food. Only this region could provide food self-sufficiency to not only Africa, but to the rest of the world in a very clean and viable way, which would help to change that imbalance of trade. So part of what we are doing here this week as African business communities trying to take our destiny is to identify these opportunities and see how we walk these opportunities to real life situations of transforming them into actual projects and transactions.
All right, that's good to know. Now let's leave the African Caribbean Trade Investment Forum. Let's now talk about some achievements of Premier Invest. Sorry, let me not get it well. In May 2024, Gabon Oil Company signed an exclusive 6-month agreement with Premier Invest to finance the acquisition of the Gabonese assets for U.S. private equity firm Carlyle, owner of Gabon-focused oil and gas company Esala Energy. Can you give us more details on this transaction?
Again, this is around global Africa taking its own destiny into its own hands. African has resources, Africa produces resources, Africa transforms those resources and exploits to the global world. The Central African country of Gabon is a producing country of oil products, and they've decided to exempt their rights in the acquisition of an oil asset that was being managed by a private equity firm. As part of this arrangement, the government of Gabon has signed a sales purchase agreement to acquire the shares of the investor who is divesting. And we've been very fortunate that our services were called upon to advise the company and the government around a process for identifying potential investors to provide them funding through this exercise. We continue to work with the company to find the right solutions, and we believe that very soon we shall be closing a very successful transaction run by an indigenous African country and an indigenous African firm to raise a significant amount of money, which exceeds over $1.2 billion.
That's a great achievement. Is there any other achievement that is coming soon and you would like to tell us about?
The team is working on a number of very important leads across the continent in various sectors, which include maritime transportation, which include financial services, which include processing, which includes supporting with infrastructure works around logistics. So we are very hopeful that working with some of our financing and development partners, we will continue to contribute to the economic development of our continent.
Now, what are the expansion targets of Premier Invest?
We have very modest plans to set up a regulated fund, credit and investment fund. We're working with the regulators at this moment to try to obtain the necessary approvals for licenses.
All right, so let's now get out of this interview with these last questions. According to experts, Africa, comprising 17% of the world's population, commands just 4% of global GDP and a mere 2% of world manufacturing output. How do you think this situation can be remedied?
I think that narrative is changing significantly. Africa today is a major destination for growth. The potential, the opportunity for growth, the African story is different. The narrative has changed around the African story. We see a lot more attention, a lot more foreign direct investment, a lot more engagement with Africa to try to see how the opportunity of whether it's commodities, transformation, energy, power, climate is happening on the continent. So that narrative for me is changing. The world, the global world order, the global economic order is changing rapidly in these times now. And Africa has a very, very young, vibrant population, which is something which is on both the demand side and the supply side in terms of labor, workforce, skilled workforce. So, and we're going to see this in all sectors. We're going to see this in creatives, we're going to see it in sports, we're going to see it in manufacturing, we're going to see it in IT, we're going to see it in technology. We can see the amount of African talent that is all over the world in these industries. So that narrative is changing. That measure of Africa's contribution to global output, productivity, and wealth is also changing. Certainly certain things need to be fixed, like continuous improvements around governance, continuous improvements around infrastructure, continuous improvements around sustainable power and energy on the continent to be able to accompany that growth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Awambeng, for answering Africa 24's English questions. It was our pleasure to have you.
My pleasure.
Ladies and gents, here comes the end of the interview, but stay tuned to our programs.